Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Learning Content Strategies for the Age of YouTube and Facebook. My name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with Biz Library, and I'll be the host for today's session. Before we get started, I want to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. First, what you should see on your screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, this is the webinar viewer, so this is where you'll see the content that we're sharing with you today. On the right-hand side of the screen, this is the control panel, so this is where you can join the audio portion of today's webinar, and you can also communicate with us through the question box. The default mode for the control panel is for it to collapse. If you want to open the control panel back up, simply click the orange box with the white arrow in it, and it'll expand for you. All of today's attendees are in listen-only mode. You can join the audio portion of today's webinar either through the teleconference line. You can also listen through your speakers. If you're going to listen through your speakers, I recommend either using a pair of headphones or a headset to get the best audio quality. We like to keep things pretty informal, so if you have any questions or discussion points, feel free to send them over through the question box that's located within the control panel. I like to weave the questions in as it relates to what we're discussing in the webinar, and then I'll also leave some time at the end for Q&A. I am recording the webinar today, so I'll make a link to the webinar recording as well as the slides and follow-up information available on our blog after today's session. So that's bizlibrary.com/bizblog. Also, if you'd like to download the slides for today's session, I put a link to them in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I also send out a link to the slides in the reminder email that you should have received this morning. For all of you HR professionals attending, today's session is approved for 1 hour CE credit for all of you looking to get your PHR, SPHR, GPHR. I'll make a link to the completion certificate available at the end of today's webinar. I'll also send out a follow-up email that will include a link to the completion certificate as well as the slides and the webinar recording. If you'd like more information on certification or recertification, I encourage you to visit hrci.org. Again, my name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with Biz Library. I've been working in the training and development industry now for about 5 years. I'm very active in social media, so I tweet on behalf of Biz Library at Biz Library and also at my own account at Jess L. Petrie. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so I like to share a lot of articles and discussions around training and development, human resources, and marketing. So if you're on either of those social networks, would love it if you'd reach out and connect. Presenting with us today is Chris Osborne. Chris is the VP of Marketing for Biz Library. He's also worked in a consulting capacity with a Paris-based leadership development consulting firm where he helped organizations design and implement leadership and executive development programs. He's been performing learning, development, and training functions formally since 2000 and informally for organizations since 1987. Prior to Chris's move into the business sector, he practiced law in the areas of labor, employment, and business litigation for over 12 years. He graduated from WashU School of Law with honors in 1987. Chris is also active in social media, so you can find him on Twitter at Chris Osborne STL, and he's also active on LinkedIn, so I'm sure he'd love it if you'd reach out and connect as well. Just to give you a little bit of background on Biz Library, Biz Library is a leading provider of online employee training and e-learning solutions. The award-winning content library contains more than 7,000 online training videos that cover every training topic, so things like communication skills, leadership and management, sales and customer service, compliance and safety training, desktop computer skills, and more. Additionally, Biz Library's LMS, or Learning Management System, and Social Learning Technology Platform help HR and training leaders improve and manage employee learning. All right, so enough about us. I have 2 quick poll questions for today, so you should see them pop up on your screen in just a moment. So this first poll question is, how do most of your employees access training? Is it A, formal, so online or instructor-led, B, informal, on their own with the help of the almighty Google, C, social, they learn from each other, D, experiential, so they learn from on the job or experiences on the job, and then E, or E something else.
Hey Jessica, how you doing?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
Well, I am very well. This is one of our more fascinating poll questions. We ask at least one poll question in all of our webinars, and this is one where I think we get one of the more interesting sets of results, particularly given some data we're going to share, or at least a theory we're going to share here in just a little while. Interesting. Yeah, and if you do say, we haven't had anybody yet, not a single person has voted something else, which is interesting, which is perfectly fine, but those of you who are saying informal, well, now we knew it, of course, as soon as I said that, somebody does. Those of you who are saying informal and something else, let us know how you think that's, what you think those channels are. What is it that they're doing? So the informal, what is it they're doing on their own, or what sources are they tapping into? And the something else, what is it? What do you see that being? Would be real curious to learn.
Well, and we'll talk about it some in this webinar, but it's the idea of what is learning content or how people are learning sometimes gets muddled. So what do you consider is informal learning? What's considered formal learning? Or do the distinctions really even matter? Like, is it really that relevant if it's something that's formal, informal? Maybe it's social, experiential. The idea is that employees are learning, but how can we facilitate that? All right, so I'll go ahead and close out this poll, share the results, and then we have one more. So it looks like we've got, let's see, 68% said formal, so online or instructor-led. 16% said experiential, so on the job. 12% informal. 4% social from each other, and 1% said something else.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I'm just going to let these numbers stay there for, just keep these in mind, and I'll have access to these numbers later, but we're going to talk about a theory of learning, which I think when we get into it, will challenge some assumptions there a little bit. So, interesting.
All right, this next poll question is about your learning strategy. So how would you describe your learning strategy? Would you say that it's A, we have a solid strategy and evaluate it continuously. B, we have a strategy but don't always follow it. C, learning and development is ad hoc at best. D, strategy, what strategy, or E, something else?
Yeah, this is another really good poll question. And those of you who say something else, again, let us know what that is. We'd be really curious. And those of you who are in, we have a strategy but don't always follow it, that's probably more common than any of us would like to believe. We do our best to put a strategy together, but even the best laid plans don't always get followed through. And for many organizations, learning and development end up kind of situational, that happen on an ad hoc basis. We used to see that all the time when I was in the consulting world. And those of you who are answering strategy, what strategy, thank you for your candor. I think that's probably, again, a lot more accurate than many of us would like to believe.
All right, great. I'll go ahead and close it out, share the results with everyone. So we've got 31% say we have a strategy but don't always follow it. 27% said learning and development are ad hoc at best. 22% we have a solid strategy and evaluate it continuously. 16% strategy, what strategy, and 3% said something else.
Yeah, I can't express surprise with this. So basically 1 in 5 of our participants in the poll today say we have a solid strategy and evaluate it continuously, which is, the optimum. That's where we want everybody to get to, but it's hard to do. And it's really difficult to do when, we're dealing with approaches to content that don't help us really reach our employees very effectively. And that's the point of today's webinar. So it's a good lead into what we wanted to talk to you about today.
Yeah, so there are 3 high-level takeaways that we hope that you learned today. Chris, I'll pass the ball over to you. You can run through those, and we'll keep going.
All right. Well, I'm going to do my best to get this to work the way I want it to, and let's hope that you see the correct slide. Do you see the what we hope you'll learn slide? Is that correct?
Yep, we're good to go.
All right. Well, thanks for getting us started today, Jessica. I really appreciate it. And when you think about learning in general, but learning content specifically, we have seen social networking, social sites, Web 2.0, however you want to look at it, really changed the dynamic of how we interact with each other away from work, how we interact with content on the web, how we take in information, we view entertainment. I mean, just think of all of the incredible changes in our behaviors, day-to-day behaviors. And think of the ways in which these advances have changed the way we work with customer information, and think about all the different influences that these types of tools have had all around us at work. And then step back and think, have we effectively adapted all of these influences, and positive influences, I might add, in our learning? In many ways we haven't, and that's a mistake, to be honest. So we were going to talk to you about that, because there have been incredible changes around us, and we really need to understand those, which leads us to a definition, what we think, a definition of learning content today. We really need to get our hands wrapped around a modern definition of learning content in this marketplace, in this environment. And we need to understand the critical importance of how to curate, that is to organize, and deliver learning content to meet employee needs. And if we really embrace these three elements into an effective learning content strategy, we have a really great chance to move forward. Just the whole, learning approach to our organization, everything that we can be improved. So, the classroom, we've all been there. We all spend a lot of years there. And corporate training, traditional corporate training, is modeled on exactly this model. And if you think about it, really and truly think about it, this is a 19th century model for education. And we modeled 20th century training, and to some extent, now 21st century corporate instructor-led training, on a 19th century model of learning. I know that seems a little strange to say, but it's true. And think about the rest of your business. Think about the industry you're in. Think about businesses broadly. Can we think of any other process, any other really important process, in which a 19th century model for operation survives intact today? And there are not many. There are not many. And particularly when it comes to human behavior, we've learned so much about how the human mind works and how we learn, and it doesn't always work effectively in this setting. And that's really kind of the point of today's session. So if you start to think about, the juxtaposition of that traditional model of learning with what's happening all around us, 6 billion hours of video are watched each month on YouTube. That's almost an hour for every person on Earth. That is a mind-boggling number. But it tells you just how much hunger and thirst there is for video-based content out there. This is turning into the preferred method for taking in information of all sorts. I mean, if you think about, news sites, I mean, even traditional sites like the Wall Street Journal and established sites like CBS News or CNN or the New York Times, or it doesn't make any difference where you go, what news outlet. There's always video choices now, and there's a reason for that. The video is almost always accessed more often than are the print articles. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just the reality of it. Then you think about the impact of social sites. Facebook, the largest social site in the world, average number of time spent on Facebook per user per month is 8.3 hours. I mean, we spend an enormous amount of time connected to each other virtually too, away from work. I mean, that's massive. I have to confess, that's probably on the low side for me, but I've got friends scattered all over the place. I've got kids that live out of state and travel quite a bit. So this has turned into an invaluable tool to stay in close touch with friends and reconnect with people. I actually find a lot of value in these tools, but the reality that this is how we live and work today. And I mentioned earlier that we were going to talk to you about a theory of training, and I wanted to compare that with the poll results we got earlier. You probably have heard about this, but the 70-20-10 framework. And this is a theory of learning, which says that we acquire 70% of the knowledge and skill that we need to effectively perform our jobs informally, on our own, through self-study, through on-the-job training. 20% socially, that is from each other, through observable behaviors, and 10% formally. 70% informally, 20% socially, 10% formally. And traditional learning and development programs, traditional employee training strategies, traditional employee training approaches focus on the 10%. And I did. That's the area in which I learned about employee training. That's where I function, classroom training, classroom development, eventually e-learning. That's where I was for years in beginning of my career in this space. I didn't really understand the 70-20-10. But if you step back and think about this, think about the things that you have picked up, the knowledge that you've acquired, that you apply effectively every day on the job. How did you learn? How did you learn most effectively? Is it because you sat down in the classroom somewhere, or is it because you got out and tried things and learned from experience, from failures, from successes, or that you had other people to rely upon to ask questions to guide you? Or was it strictly because of formal training? I think if we're honest with ourselves, we'd say each of us at some point in our career fall heavily in that 70-20 piece of it. At different stages in our career, we probably relied heavily upon some sort of formal training. But over the course of our work professional lives, that 70-20 makes sense. Then look at these. I love this statistic that Jessica put in the middle of this slide for us. 76% of managers felt their learning and development function was ineffective or very ineffective in helping them achieve business targets. And that's from the Corporate Leadership Council L&D Team Capabilities Survey published in 2011. So even when we are delivering formal training, frequently we're not very effective. So again, this is not, we're not suggesting that there's anything wrong with formal training. In fact, just the opposite. We're big advocates of formal training. We sell an important component to formal training. We just are suggesting that we have to adapt the approaches that we're taking to training to reflect a different framework. This kind of illustrates what I was talking about before, that the traditional learning strategy and our traditional learning content strategies were over here on this 10% of the learning. And what we're suggesting is, and what I really want to get each of you to think about carefully, is how to be here, how to think about a next generation of learning strategies that incorporates our involvement in 100% of the learning experiences of our employees, so that we're a real partner, we're a facilitator, we're there, we're helping. At every step of the way, we are facilitating the experiential learning. We're a partner in social learning. We're facilitating that, and we are helping with the formal learning. This is how we're going to maintain relevance and importance and find a place at the strategic table in our organizations. There's a way to do this, but it requires us to kind of think differently about strategies in general, and certainly think differently about the way we are approaching content. So traditional approaches to learning were focused on improving known skills to solve known problems. Again, this is exactly the world that I entered, and we still have to do some of this, But frequently, what we're going to be asked to do today is to prepare employees to deal with dilemmas, to prepare our workforce, our leaders, our employees for jobs that may not exist today, and this requires a different approach. So let's think about content. From our perspective, a next generation of content that will help us do these things has three critical elements. We need to redefine content. We need to have a curation strategy, and we'll talk about exactly what that means in a minute, and we cannot leave out the delivery of the content. We can have the greatest definition in the world, we can have it organized, we can do the curation piece, but if we can't get it to our employees effectively, none of it matters. So these three elements are highly interdependent and all equally important. So those are the three key pieces of a next generation content strategy. Jessica, are there any questions that we should take before we move into this, or are we ready, or should we keep going?
We're ready to go. Keep going.
All right. So what are the characteristics of the content that we are used to absorbing away from work? If you think about, I talked about the rise of Web 2.0 and the kind of content that we are used to absorbing away from work. And Facebook's actually a great illustration of that. But so are the news sites I mentioned earlier, like CNN and the Wall Street Journal are two that I read regularly, as are the New York Times and many others. But it's immediate, right? I mean, the illustration here, we've got somebody with a cup of coffee and a tablet in front of them. It's personalized as well. We can look at just the content we want to look at, and frequently aimed at a profile that we've created. Think about your shopping experiences at Amazon or music sites such as Pandora or Spotify. And it's democratic with the small d, meaning that user-generated content, we are all treated the same. So if there's an article, for instance, at the Wall Street Journal, and I submit a comment, my comment stands the same as a comment from Carl Icahn or some other, heavyweight in the economic world. It's democratic content with a small d. Everybody's content can be the same. And of course, we're very definitely used to user-generated comment. You go to newspapers and magazines, and it becomes kind of weird when you can't read user comments, right? I mean, we're used to that. And there's even a name we've now got a name for people that pose provocative comments. It's the trolls, come along. But valuable user-generated comment, I love to see good discussions. That's part of the fun. You see, at Facebook, somebody posts a funny picture or an interesting video or a piece of music that's interesting, and some of the conversations around that are as valuable, sometimes to me at least, as valuable as the original piece of content that was put out there. Content is very social. Again, this is a big piece of this. It gets shared at Twitter, at Facebook, at LinkedIn. I mean, you pick your social network, and content can go viral quickly, and we can post content wherever we want associated with our profiles, with our brand, whatever we want to do. And content today is relentlessly mobile. Relentlessly mobile. I mean, we are seeing right in front of us the rapid rise in the use of mobile browsers. I mean, if any of you pay any attention to the amount of web traffic that comes to your organization's website, you will see the volume of tablet and mobile phone users going up really fast. People are, these are turning into the web browser devices of choice for many, many people. I probably spend more time on the internet on my iPad than I do any other device that I use. It's just my own personal behavior. It's convenient. It's easy. It's with me pretty much wherever I go. So all of this kind of tied together, you start to think about how do those characteristics of content compare to the way we have traditionally built e-learning courses. And I mentioned earlier, you've got a background in instructional design. I used to build e-learning courses, and this is exactly how I used to build them. Each of the apples in the basket, we used to call those chunks. And we learned early on in instructional design courses and in industrial psychology about that feedback loop, short-term feedback loop, that we can remember a single piece of content for 5 to 7, 8 minutes, whatever it is, and we can then transfer that effectively into long-term memory. But if we start to try to throw too many pieces of content at us at a time, it gets diluted, it gets confused. So we learned to chunk content. So we would create these chunks of content in 4 to 6 minute, 5 minute pieces, and string chunks together to create a traditional e-learning course and put it in a wrapper, a basket, so to speak, and we'd put that content out there. And so we would expect users then to access that e-learning course. That's how we did it. It's also how we built classroom courses too. But the problem with that is what we're seeing today is users' behaviors are different. Learners access content away from work quite a bit differently. They don't necessarily need the whole basket. I mean, think of a course about PowerPoint, for example. Let's say that I'm working with a new version of PowerPoint, and I'm trying to embed a video from a video site, say Vimeo, into my PowerPoint. And all I need to do is figure out how to do that one specific task. I don't want to go look at a 90-minute or 60-minute PowerPoint course to find that one piece. I want to access that one specific learning nugget because that answers a question I'm asking in the moment. So this is what content looks like away from work. It's immediate, it's personalized, it's user-generated, and it's short. It's much shorter. That's where the mobile piece also comes in, which leads directly to a definition that we wanted to get to. The first leg of the stool is the definition, all right? So here's the definition of content that we want to suggest makes sense in this marketplace. What is content? Content is anything that answers a question that we might be asking in the moment. So, now think of a traditional answer to what is content. We've traditionally thought of learning content as content that we would prepare for employees and put in front of them in that basket, that e-learning course, or in a classroom, or send them off-site for a workshop or something. Content used to be thought of as what we told employees it was. But behaviors are different today. In this world where we only hold a small percentage of what we need to know to perform our job, that's the great paradox of knowledge workers, by the way. We hold a smaller percentage of what we need to know to perform our job between our ears than at any other time in history. We have to think of content differently. Content is anything that answers a question that we might be asking in the moment. So we can find it socially, but it's something that can help us perform. And this is another key piece of it. This is the relevant part of it. Our employees are not looking for goofy fun stuff. They are actually, when they're bringing their own devices to work, and trust me, they are, and when they're looking for answers for questions in the moment, which they are actually looking for help to perform. Data proves this. Their behaviors demonstrate this. And we have two choices. We can ignore this or we can be a part of it. But it requires us to get our hands around a new definition of content. So this is how we are recommending that we define it. Jessica, anything to add to this definition?
We have an ad from Yanette. So she had in talking about mobile learning. So she said, I'm all for mobile learning, lots of benefits, convenience, etc. But I still believe that for it to actually stick, it has to be complemented with on-the-job training. So any comments or reflections on that, Chris?
Yeah, actually, it kind of leads right into the next slide that I wanted to get to, and gets to the point that I was just making on it. That's why relevance is so important, why it's got to be tied to, it's about performance. It's about improved performance. So if you think about the example I gave, that's really what this is about. It's about helping employees answer questions tied to their performance, okay? This isn't about providing them, information about the great next social trend or this week's soccer games or a movie time or restaurant menus. It's about providing them content that answers questions they're asking that will help push the behavior changes we need to drive improved performance, defined by the business objectives that we have laid out for ourselves as an organization from a strategic perspective. So this doesn't happen in a vacuum. That's the other piece of this I want to make sure that we understand. We are not suggesting that it's just like the Wild West in terms of content, because if you're not involved with your employees, it is the Wild West. I promise you, I absolutely promise you, your employees are using their own devices. If they're bringing smartphones and tablets to work, they are using those devices to access the web, to look up information, and they're looking up information at YouTube, at Google, and who knows what they're finding. They may be finding very helpful, very useful information. They may not. Who knows? And that's kind of the point of that, right? Who knows? So you can let that happen, or you can find ways to participate with them, to help them, to guide them, to help them target useful information, targeted to help you achieve business objectives and goals, and help support the behaviors that you're wanting to encourage at work. So use the definition I gave earlier about PowerPoint. You know, why send me to YouTube to look up unvetted, who knows who made PowerPoint content when you can find different sorts of content that you know is subject matter expertise built and vetted, and I mean there's a whole range of ways to get at this, but the content definition has to have with it a purpose, a strategic purpose. That's the other piece of this that gets right into what Janet was saying. And I mentioned earlier video, just go back to what we talked about earlier with the volume of video that people are absorbing, and you can look at tons and tons of research at Twitter, at LinkedIn, at Facebook, at which types of posts, which types of tweets, which types of messages get repeated the most often, get used the most frequently, get shared the most often. It's video links. You can look at web traffic, your own company's web traffic, and look at in-page hotspots. Look at what people click on. It's video. If you look at web research about any type of news site, you're going to find that the content that's most frequently absorbed is video. Well, there's reasons for it. People prefer it, one, but it also is very, very effective at communicating information. Jessica, you built this slide, and I love the way you lay this out. Would you explain this for us? Because I just think this is a great illustration.
Sure, Chris. So if you think about the idea of you're going to bake a chocolate cake, and a lot of us may be baking more for the holidays or maybe for Thanksgiving coming up. So think about if you're going to try a new recipe out and you wanted to learn how to do it. What are the ways that you would look for it? So this says, so you can look at a paper recipe. So maybe you find a recipe online, or maybe you found an index card from your mom that had this really great recipe and you want to try it out. So if you were to look at that index card and then try to repeat that recipe, you'd likely retain 10% of it if it's just text. Add in images, 65% retention. So not only are you able to read the basic text of the ingredients and the basic directions for baking the cake, but you're also able to see what you should expect. So say, okay, should this batter really look like this, or is it maybe it's a little too thick, or whatever. So you're able to get those other sort of different triggers to let you know that you're on the right track. And then go to video, and 95% of that's retained. So not only are you able to understand the directions, the ingredients, have an idea of what you should be looking for, but you can also pick up on other things that are relevant to you that maybe aren't relevant to other people. So maybe you weren't really familiar with the technique of how to shave the chocolate to put it on the top of the cake. And maybe they don't explicitly say that in the directions, or maybe they don't even explicitly say it in the video, but you're able to pick up on that just from watching the actions and the behaviors of whoever's teaching you. So there's a lot of different elements, and I'm sure everyone's aware of adult learning theory and all the different elements that go into that, but it just goes to show you how something as basic as that. So there's a ton of other things so that you could think of how to apply that, but that's just one kind of basic way.
Yeah, it's a great illustration. I love that. And just speaking of baking, my wife, who is not always thrilled to be in the kitchen, was trying to make some chocolate meringue for something and used the index card methodology and then realized that it didn't look very meringue, and then went to look at the video and realized, whoops, and wished she had had the video all along. So anyway, this actually works. It's totally true. So does this translate into employee training? Yes, it does. Absolutely it does. If you think about the connection between the science of video and what we know about adult learning, all of this feeds together, and it creates this really powerful combination. We know that adults learn best in short bursts of single bits of content, 5 to 15 minutes. That's the chunking. Short video especially works great for that. We just had that illustration of the difference in 72-hour retention of something we read, something we see a picture of, compared to video. Visual input is the best methodology for cognitive transfer. That's what I was talking about, from short-term to long-term memory. And the behaviors, just the natural market-based behaviors, prove pretty conclusively that video, short-form video in particular, is the preferred method for most people to intake new information. So let's not fight this. Let's take advantage of it. Let's leverage the power of short-form video to amplify the impact and effect of our learning content strategies. Let's adopt this as a key piece of it. And does this deliver business results? I mean, that's another piece of it. I mean, all of this is great, but Molly Lombardi at the Aberdeen Group published an article based upon research in eLearning Magazine, the April-May 2013 issue, that compared the impact along critical business goals of organizations using video content, by the way, including user-generated video, and those organizations not using video content, and found pretty significant differences along organizations achieving organizational goals. Now, these are high-achieving learning organizations, too. So these are organizations that are already doing really well with learning, but 81% compared to 76% achieve organizational goals. They had more engaged employees. They filled key positions more quickly. So using video content to help amplify already effective learning programs yielded improved results. So there is a business case for this, in addition to the adult learning theory case for this, in addition to the brain science case for this, for redefining content to mean anything that answers a question we need in the moment, to include short-form video as a key component of that. Okay, which leads us to the second of the three critical elements of our definition, and that is curation. Now, curation is a key step in making content useful, okay? So if you think about, you've heard this before, content is king, but context is queen. So you can't have one without the other. And curation is really adding context to the content. So let's just say hypothetically that we have decided to build a series of short-form videos, and we've recorded a series of 10 or 15 videos on manager and supervisor training, and here we've got this video, and wow, they're really good, and but we don't organize them very well. We don't put them into a context so that our employees can figure out when to apply them and when it makes sense to access them. It doesn't work, does it? There has to be a context for the content, and the context sometimes can be difficult and not always the easiest thing to pull together, but it is ultimately extremely critical. Like we said earlier, these three pieces of a next generation content strategy, the definition, the curation, the delivery, all are incredibly interrelated. You really cannot effectively deliver and have a great content strategy without all three elements working together. So in terms of your content curation, this is about organizing the content so that when it's accessed, there is a clear business purpose for it. People understand when and how to apply it. That's really what this comes down to, so that your employees understand the relevance of it. That's the ultimate purpose of the context. So, for instance, you have these courses I mentioned before. You put the series of supervisory courses together. Are they for entry-level supervisors just recently promoted? Are they for mid-level supervisors? Are they advanced level courses? What specific skills are they designed to help improve? Listening skills, coaching skills, performance management skills, delegation skills. All of these elements are important to create a context so that your employees can search the content and figure out what's relevant to their needs in the moment when they have an opportunity to learn and really build their skills. It becomes an incredibly important piece of this. And again, thinking back to the idea that content can be anything, it can be blog posts, articles, any kind of document that you have that is of value. It can be formal content, classrooms, discussion sessions, discussion groups. It can be anything that can help them so that it's searchable and relevant to the employees so that they can make informed choices about whether the content should be absorbed or not. It is extremely an important piece of this. Now, Jessica will tell you that I tend not to be the most structured person in the world. I tend to fight structure in many phases in my life. But back when I was doing a lot of consulting work, one of the initiatives that I got involved with a couple of different organizations was a couple of very fun and very interesting innovation initiatives. And one of the things that I learned throughout the work that I did with them and with the Edison Foundation was ultimately how important structure is for so many elements around an organization. And in the end, it's the structure that sets our content free to do its magic. Without the structure, great content will never find its proper place, nor will it ultimately work. And here's a great way to illustrate that. So let's just say hypothetically that we were all together in a meeting room, and I handed you all a piece of paper, and I said, make something. Just a blank piece of paper. Now just do something. I guarantee what I'd get, because I've done this in sessions before, I get a lot of blank looks. Some people would kind of start doodling and scribbling, but mostly I'd get a lot of blank looks. Sort of like create, be creative. I've given you a blank page, create something. It's really, really hard to do that. On the other hand, if I handed everybody a sheet of paper and I said, okay, now let's all make an interesting paper airplane. Now you've got a structure around which all sorts of interesting creative ideas can flow, because you've got limitations on it, and all kinds of things can happen. The structure in the end sets the ideas free, creates the space for the innovation, and it works the same way for your content. A structure lets the content get into the right place, into the right format, and lets your employees understand what they're looking at and why they should pay attention to it. Jessica, you put together a really interesting slide that I want to share, and I'm going to let you talk about it here real quick. Let's see if I can get the slide to advance. There it is.
Yeah, so here is an example of content curation. So this comes from one of our clients. So they provide this to their leadership development participants in addition to their online learning center. So what this is, if you've ever heard of Paperly, or another good one is Scoop It. So basically you can add Scoop It, this is Paperly, but Scoop It, you will scoop different articles and videos or things that you find across the internet, and then you can tag them into specific categories. So for example, I have a Scoop It that I do one for leadership and learning, and then I have one on marketing strategies and ideas. So you can scoop different finds, and then people can subscribe to those. So you can recommend that certain employees subscribe to that. So Paperly works, it's an online newspaper. So they've done it for leadership development content. So they've included specific hashtags as well as specific Twitter handles that they think are relevant to their leadership development participants. So this is an idea of how you can start to curate and filter out some of the content from across the web. So granted, you could have your online training center or your LMS that provides a little bit more formal training resources, or maybe you have an enterprise social network, but you could use this as an additional supplement. So help getting your employees out there, discovering new people to follow, new people to interact with on their own. So this can be another great way. I thought it was an innovative way to look at learning and development. I haven't necessarily seen it used in this way before.
Yeah, well, Dan Sloan is one of our primary contacts at this company. He's a really, really bright guy. But this is really cool. And by the way, those of you who are active in social media, that smart brief on leadership there in the middle of the third column, that Tanvir Nasir, he is a brilliant writer on leadership. I highly recommend following him on Twitter and reading his blogs. But yeah, isn't that an interesting way to do this, though? I love the way that they are curating and delivering content to their employees, which leads us to the third element of the definition, and that is the delivery. So we've defined content broadly to be anything that answers a question. We've explained why curation, that is helping organize content so it's searchable, it's relevant, so we can apply it, and we can provide a context. The next piece of it is delivery. And ultimately, the delivery becomes, again, really, really important. This is where we want to make sure that we have virtually no barriers between the content that we've done a hard job, done the hard work of defining and now organizing and getting it put into a great place, getting it really ready to use. We want to make sure that there's no barriers between that content and our employees. We want to make it easy and simple to access when and where it's needed. So we really are strong advocates of using cloud-based systems that really focus on mobile delivery for a couple of reasons. One, the cloud-based tools are scalable. You can really ramp those up very, very easily. In mobile, this is where we live. Your employees are, they literally can have access to important content wherever they are, whenever they need it, no matter where they happen to be located. In more and more organizations, BizLibrary is a great illustration. We're a small company, and we have employees working all over the United States. And we're not alone. That's becoming more and more common. And unless we embrace the idea that we're going to deliver content in these ways, it's very difficult to provide a learning solution that's relevant to our employees' needs. So you have to think about the systems and tools that make sense in your organization. What's going to work, okay? What will your employees use effectively? Think carefully as you answer that first question. Ask yourself carefully, how are they accessing information at work, away from work? And you want to do everything you can to reproduce the same type of fluid, barrier-free access to learning information, to learning content for work. And I think you got to figure out a way to capture user-generated content. There used to be an old saw in management that our most valuable asset is our employees. The reality of that is that your most valuable asset isn't necessarily your employees. The most valuable asset in your organization is the knowledge of your employees, particularly the knowledge-based economy and for knowledge-based workers. So, if that's your most valuable asset, what are you doing to gather it, collect it, organize it, and reproduce it? If you accept that the knowledge of your employees is valuable, then you have to find a way as a part of a content strategy to capture it. That becomes a really important piece of a content strategy. But think about the things that your employees know about your customers, about your competition, about the market. Think about the things that your employees learn every day in their interaction with prospects, with your they're learning a lot. The collective wisdom of the many far outpaces the knowledge of one or two people. And it's really important to figure out how to allow employees to put that information out there for others to access and to use. And this is where the lessons of social platforms become really, really helpful. What can we learn? I mean, what are the key features that we can apply to our own learning platforms? Well, one of the things that we've learned here at BizLibrary is to allow for user comments and user ratings. We have a social learning platform where we can, post updates, post links. I mean, so what can you do? What can you do to capture user-generated content and curate it, make it usable, searchable, so that other people can get to it? So the answer is ultimately the solution to this dilemma for all of us in terms of having a content strategy that's going to work in this age of Facebook and YouTube is we actually have to do less content creation, and we have to facilitate a lot more learning. That is, we have to facilitate the collection of content, organize content more effectively. Think of that great example from DWA. That was a wonderful, wonderful illustration of an organization that is facilitating the dissemination of valuable content. We have to think about delivery of content with a mobile-first approach. We have to harness the power of social learning in our organization. Think about all the different ways that we connect with each other away from work, and the power of social networking, the power of social media. There is no reason to forfeit that power, that effectiveness at the front door of our offices. We can use those same types of tools to amplify the impact and effect of learning within our organization. We just have to capture that and become invested ourselves in social learning and lead that effort. Then we have to curate, redefine, and deliver content in ways that are relevant and meaningful to our employees. That's really it. It isn't any more complex than that. So the key takeaways for you today, at least from my perspective, the content and the technology cannot be separate things. You have got to marry these things together. Your learning content and your technology platform have to work together as seamless, interchangeable elements. Your employees cannot see a difference between the things. Your content has to work within your technology platform as if it were the same exact thing. There should be no distinction. Think about Facebook. We all think about Facebook as the social networking tool, but it's there because of the content. You really can't separate those things. Twitter, the same way. It's a news feed. You don't separate Twitter from the content. Our learning platforms have to work the same exact way. The next generation of learning strategy is centered on improving performance by delivering content when and where and how employees need it. Again, content is king, but the when, where, and how is the context. So content is king, context is queen. Michael Rochelle is the Chief Strategy Officer at Brandon Hall. He spoke at our client conference in 2013. I love this comment. In a world of learning and development where complexity is the enemy, organizations need a simple and nimble approach to delivering high-quality learning anywhere, anytime. We agree completely. But the key statement, the key element of this statement is complexity is the enemy. And that is really what we are suggesting with a new look at a content strategy. You have to eliminate the complexity at every opportunity. Remove the barriers between the content and your employees, and you're going to have a much, much more successful learning program. All right, Jessica, I'm going to mute myself and turn this back over to you to finish up, and I'll hit the question pane, and we'll take a few questions before we wrap up.
Super. Sounds good, Chris. You should see the question box that's located within the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, so you can continue to send over questions through that. I have a couple of recommended resources for today's attendees. This first one is a short video. It's called The Answer to Business Success. So it looks at tracking and measuring and discussing the continuous improvement process. So it should be relevant to you if you're looking at improving your learning strategy today. This next one is called Creating Great Business Video. So we talked a bit about video and its impact on learning and our lives today. So if you want to get started with video, this is a great new series. It's produced by Biz Library. The specific video talks about the new learner, so it'll give you some great data and some facts that you can use in developing your strategy and appealing to those new learners in your organization. A couple other recommended resources. So if you're creating content on your own, these are more technical courses, so one on Captivate and one on Adobe Premiere as well. So all of these resources and more are included in the Biz Library collection. So the collection includes more than 7,000 videos and e-learning courses, more than 25 topic areas, and it's set up to where your employees get unlimited access. So you can try out any of the resources that I recommended today or any of the other resources included in the collection. If you'd like to do a free 30-day trial, just let me know through the poll or through the question box if you'd like to try them out. All right, so some good questions. Chris, is there one that you want to get started with first, or would you like me to grab one for you?
Well, why don't you grab one? There's several good ones, but I'll let you grab one, and then we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good. This first one's from Sabrina Yvette. So she says, do you think social learning is generational, meaning is this something that older learners embrace value?
Well, I don't think it's generational. I think that I think that's one of the prevailing myths out there about generational differences. We've kind of fallen into this thinking that baby boomers, and I am one. I will be very frank about that. Boomers have been sort of painted with this broad brush that we're real resistant to technology. That just isn't true. In my lifetime, and I think other boomers, and if there's other boomers on here that disagree, I'd be happy to hear, but in my lifetime, I've seen technology advances do a lot to make my life enriched and enhanced and easier. I mean, I know some of this stuff you're going to hear this and kind of go, well, duh, but ATM machines, cell phones, desktop computing, laptops, this stuff didn't exist when I was growing up, but it exists now, and I am wholeheartedly all in on all this stuff. And if you think of great technology companies, I mean, giants in the industry like Microsoft and Apple, they were founded by boomers. Baby boomers also spend by far the most on technology. So the idea that older employees are going to resist this is not true. What you have to do, though, is prove that there's a value to them, and then they're going to be all in with you. That's the trick, okay? It can't be fluff, and it can't just be extra, but if you can prove that they're going to get something out of it, and there's a reason for them to do it, it's going to make their job easier, it's going to make them more effective, they're going to be one of your best allies in your organization. So I don't think it's generational at all. I think it's kind of a myth in the generational differences. That's my opinion.
All right, this next question is from Sharon. So she says, if learning is more self-directed and learners engage with materials as needed, how does one ensure that the learner has mastered all of the objectives that management and supervisors have deemed necessary?
Oh, great question. And you know what? We do it. This is one of the places where I think the traditional approaches to learning have a lot to teach us and a lot of value as we go forward. We measure learning effectiveness really the same way. We want to make sure that we are correctly identifying the goals, the strategic goals. We want to ensure that we are evaluating the differences between our current level of performance and our desired level of performance. Then we want to make sure that we understand the behaviors, the supporting behaviors that are going to get us there. And that's where we measure the effectiveness. Are we improving our performance in those behaviors? And that's where we're coaching, and that's where we're counseling, and that's where we're training. And if we're seeing improvement, then, hey, we're right where we want to be. And if we're not, then we encourage additional learning and additional development. That hasn't, the best practices in that area haven't really changed. I think the approach to it's a little different, and I think the real focus has to be on performance and improved behaviors, which I think is a little shift in vocabulary and focus for a lot of us, but that's how you do it.
All right, I'll go ahead and wrap up today. Again, I'm going to close out this poll, but if you'd like to do a free 30-day trial, just let me know through the question box, or you can send me an email at jpetrie@bizlibrary.com. For those of you that are attending for HRCI credit, putting a link to the certificate in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Just a reminder, I'll also send out a link to the completion certificate, the webinar recording, and the slides. You should receive that in your inbox around 4 p.m. Central Time today. The most important thing to record with HRCI is the program ID number or the activity ID number that's located on that certificate. Upcoming webinars, so all of our webinars are HRCI approved, and they are free to attend. They're on our website at bizlibrary.com/webinars. So we have one this week on closing the skill gaps. It's a new webinar, so hope you'll join us for that one. And then the following week on how to build a business case for online employee training. So again, thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you for all the great questions. Thank you, Chris, for presenting.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. As you can tell, we're passionate about this topic. But I really enjoyed the attendance and great questions today. We hope to see you on a webinar in the future.